All right. Welcome, welcome. Happy New Year to everyone, since this is the first time that we're seeing you in 2025. So welcome. We are going to uh, try to leave some room to for a Q&A today, but we're going to give you state updates. We're really changing it up in 2025. We're going to give you state updates first and then give you national. So updates that are coming from the state today will be the gender and public policy internship. And I'm going to put two poor humans on the spot today because they are in the meeting when we get there and just ask them to say hello to you all because we finally were able to interview and select some wonderful people to take on the inaugural role. Then we'll talk a little bit about since based on our last meeting and the questions that and the way the conversation went, we thought that we would just do a little kind of, I don't know, overview of the attack on DEI right now, and as a point of discussion, and how, it relates to our PPPs. Then we'll talk a little bit about the project that we're working on to take action to fight Project 2025, lobby days, and the school board project. And then we'll give you updates from national. And hopefully we have some time for some Q&A. So um, any questions before we get started? All right. I see no hands yet. Then um, we'll say welcome to our new gender and public policy interns. Congratulations to our CSULB students who survived an application, a very big application pool, and we want to welcome them. So if I will, I'm looking at your boxes, but I don't want to put anyone on the spot. So um, if you want to unmute yourself and say hello, please do.
Hi, everyone. I'm Milena Clark. I'm a applied stats major at CSU Long Beach, and I'm very excited to get started with all this stuff. Yeah. Is there anything else I should talk about?
No, I that that
Perfect.
that was
That's me.
ideal. Perfect.
Perfect. Done.
Yep.
Milena.
Yeah, it's Milena, but feel free to say it however it happens. I'm not too picky.
Um, Marisol, do you want to say hi?
Of course, yeah. Hi everyone, my name is Marisol. I am a third year political science student. I go to Long Beach as well, and yeah, I'm from LA, so if anyone's from Los Angeles, hello. And I'm really excited to be working with everyone.
Thank you both so much. And I'm sure if everyone else here is in and out of some of our other meetings, you will see them again and you'll probably meet Rohan. But we are very excited to have them on and we'll give you more updates as their own projects develop out. So um, thank you very much. And let's talk about an attack on DEI. Haha. All right. Okay. So, we wanted to do a little kind of overview, and we thought we would go with some really, the basic, the image represents the basic knowledge level of what seems to be happening right now. So we thought it was very iconic. So, so what should we know for AAUW California public policy? And I thought we just kind of cycle through this. So how is DEI? You might have noticed that it seems to be the thing that is being attacked in a lot of the executive orders and in most of what is happening that is really not in line with our own public policy priorities. So I wanted to start there and just think about how it's being used and defined in the executive orders, just as a primer. One thing that seems to be happening because it's all over the place is there are two things happening at the same time. One that I think is really good and one that I'm worried about. The one is that it seems like there's a massive raising of awareness of, right, DEI as a thing, right? Um, and at the same time, a lot more education happening around what it actually is and what it entails and what it doesn't entail. The thing I'm a little concerned about, even with that awareness raising, is that some of the things I see going around um, are kind of, even though they're for awareness raising, they're not great. So that's something to keep in mind just as we're thinking about, right? DEI is certainly starts to become kind of a symbol for something rather than thinking of it as diversity, equity, inclusion, and also belonging, and how those three, right, or two units work together, right? If you have, inclusion, if you create belonging, then you are supporting, right, an already diverse population. If you have equity, then you're providing, right, people in your orbit the things that they need to succeed that might be different from what you need, and all of that supports diversity. So, how is it actually being used or defined in the executive orders? Um, have any of you read these executive orders?
No,
No.
not this time.
No, don't. I'll do it for you. Right. So, in reading the executive orders, I, you know, the book cover here is a joke, but it's also not a joke because, it's overly broad the way it's being defined in the executive orders. They keep talking about DEI ideology, right? And without actually defining it, which means that it really leaves the space for the administration to label anything they really want to label as DEI because it's being broadly defined in the executive orders. The executive orders only apply to the federal government. They do start to apply to federal laws in their direction. They are not actually a change of law that takes actual processes that we still hopefully have in place. So these are pronouncements and they can structure the way that the federal government agencies respond. Um, Obviously, they're already doing that, but they're they're not necessarily a change of law. So how are they being used and defined? They're being used to guide federal agencies. Um, the way that they're being used makes it seem like it's a blanket for the entire population. That's not true, but it's overly broad in its application. The other thing to notice is that it's trying to redefine what discrimination is in the executive orders. So, moving away from historically how we've thought about discrimination and instead calling it discrimination like, I don't know, where it's just like throwback to the early 80s where this idea of reverse racism, right, reverse discrimination is being kind of brought back into the picture as what discrimination is and isn't. So, I hope that gives you a better sense of how it's being used and defined in the executive orders. I'll pause. Any questions, comments, anything you all want to add? Because the people on this call know things too, and you might want to add.
Um, can I make an observation?
Yep.
Something I heard, I think today, was that the federal government is suing certain, and I don't recall if they stated which one it was, but are looking to sue some corporations
Hmm.
over DEI, which
Yeah.
seems to be outside of the federal government.
Hmm. Yeah, they'll try. They've been trying at the state level because the states in which you have already, the past year, this has been happening at the state level, in states like Texas, where diversity, equity, and inclusion has been legislatively restricted. And so that's already, right? So there's already mechanisms in place to or pathways in place for thinking about how that kind of action is being taken. So that's one, right? It's already been like attempts like this have already been happening at the state level. And because they're changing the definition of discrimination, that's how they're using this to go after the private companies by saying that the DEI programs themselves are discriminatory. So one thing that's been happening, at least with the companies that I work with, is one, some companies that don't want to be upfront on this are continuing to do the work but calling it something else, because DEI is good for business. And so companies aren't, right? A lot of them really aren't you know, in the business of making their business worse, especially when they work in a global economy. And so a lot of it's going underground rather than going away. And that's a tactic that's being taken. So Joy, yes, right. There will be an attempt to go after probably. And I think that's why you see a lot of companies publicly saying that they're not committing. But if you look at what's actually happening, even in the reporting on it, they'll be like, oh, we dumped our DEI programs. Instead, we're going to focus on creating a culture of care, right? Which is just code for, obviously, we're going to continue to do our DEI programs, right? So I think that there are some companies that are just ditching it, right? And those would be ones where like their client, like Tractor Supply is like, no, we don't need it. And I'm like, okay. But for the most part, I think, at least in my experience, some are really upfront with it, some aren't, and that's like how they're navigating some of those waters. Mira, sorry, you've been very patient while I give a long-winded response.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. As of today, San Jose State University is one of the universities that's being sued in regard to the transgender athlete situation.
Yeah.
And she completed her stint with volleyball in 2024. So it's going to be interesting how that plays out.
Yeah, and that's I came here after teaching a class, and that's one of the things that we were talking about in that class today was just like, because there's the attempted legal action with like for-profits, right, which have a little bit more independence from the federal government, and then the attempt to attack trans athletes is going to be more closely tied to like, federal funding. And so that's part of what we're seeing too is that, nonprofits and for-profits and educational institutions that are relying on federal funding for certain things, that's where we really see things changing and things going underground. One last thing on the legal suits, that there's been a big attempt to go after Title IX in the past 2 years. And for universities where, you know, cis het white men are basically saying I'm being discriminated against and like bringing suits under Title IX. So there's also already kind of a legal pathway for this. So this is just an amping up of like a tactic. And so good thing you already have kind of university systems that have a pathway for fighting back against it. And so I'm hoping that they can all tap into that kind of legal activism together, right? It's all about coalition building. Rachel, I see your hand.
Thank you. I just saw a blurb within the last hour that the NCAA announced today that they are changing their definition of eligibility based on sex to mean that it is the sex that the person is born with.
Ugh.
Effective immediately.
Well,
so only if you were born a male, you can participate in male athletics. If you were born female, you can participate in female athletics based on Trump's assertion within the last 24 hours.
Well, that's tragic, but we'll see. So what I would say there is look to the ongoing back and forth with the International Olympic Committee and how sex itself is defined. And so, it's the science of human sex is not settled. There's not two sexes genetically. There's more like six, right? And so that debate has been ongoing with international athletics for a very long time, but really ramped up in the last 20 years. And so I don't think I think the NCAA is in a difficult spot, and that's sad that they cave so easily. But at the same time, right, I think that there's going to be a back and forth there because there's been a lot of legal issues internationally too on that. So
I hope that that comes to bear here nationally, because that's a huge blow.
yeah,
Uh,
I agree.
yeah.
And I was traveling from campus to here and didn't hear that. That is sad. That
Yes.
is that's sad. I see Jolie. Am I saying your name right, Jolie?
You are. Thank
Okay.
you. I'm curious what AAUW's position is, or if they have one yet, and what they think they should or can do in bringing to light what various companies, organizations, entities are doing, or what their positions are on DEI, and bringing it to light. Because, if somebody doesn't tell me that, hey, this organization has dropped their DEI program and they're now calling it the, as you put it, culture of care.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't know that. Or if they're dropping their DEI program altogether, like the tractor company, I wouldn't know that. If
Right.
it would deter or enhance how I want to interact with a particular company. So how are we, or should we be letting others know?
That's a really good question. And I know Amy has one resource for tracking that she dropped to me recently. And we're going to talk about that in a minute about like some of the things that we're going to